I'm George Kelly, and this is my family history as I know it, just a narrative. Going back on my father's side, in a little town called Dromahair, County Leitrim, Ireland. The original settler there was from County Sligo. His name was Tatey McGarry, and he bought the land in a townland called Aughameelta, Aughameelta. It's still there, in the late 1700s. And the story goes from my cousin Tim, when I went over and told me back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, he bought about 20 acres of land on Aughameelta, and he lived over near Sligo, and he'd come up to a real high mountain. About once a month he'd come there and he'd count the cattle on the pasture land that he had to make sure nobody was taking his cattle. There was no housing there at the time. He's the second Tatey McGarry. And he had a son, Tatey McGarry, who was born somewhere around the 1830s. 1833, I think he was born, all right? And they were twins, Tatey McGarry and Catherine McGarry, on the townland of Aughameelta. Okay. Tatey McGarry, the young man, and about 5 or 6 other fellows came back from cutting the turf and went into the lake to go swimming. And he drowned. He just went under and never came up again. Now these are stories my cousin Tim told me. This is family stories, all right? Well, let me stop. I just remembered something. Prior to him going in the water, they were all hanging out by a fence, and a strange woman, came past. And I said to my cousin, what do you mean by strange? He said they didn't know her. She was a stranger. A young woman came past, and young Tatey went over to talk to her. And my cousin Tim used the term in 1980 to hit on her. And I said, hit on her? I said, you talk like that then? He goes, oh, that's old, which I didn't know, all right? And he said he'd like to see her later. And she said, oh, you will. And she went down the road. Then he went in to go swimming, and he drowned. So we don't know who that woman was, okay? But then his mother came, and as I said before, screaming and hysterical. They took her away, and the body came up. So what we have now, we have Catherine Kelly, Ellen Kelly, Owen Kelly, and John Kelly living in New York City, employed. 4 incomes coming into the one house. And they have John Kelly's 2 children with them. His oldest daughter, Mary Kate, known to me as Aunt Molly, and himself, John Kelly, my dad. He went to Samuel Gompers High School, I think, in Manhattan. I'm not too sure. It's a very famous old high school. He went there. He was very particular about how we spoke and using correct words, pronunciation, enunciation, that type of thing. And he really did not like the word "got." He did not like it. But when he was 20 years old, writing 30-some-odd letters to his father, all you ever read was "got," which I find a little funny. World War I came along. My dad, I have his discharge papers, and I have letters that he wrote to his dad, about 30-some-odd letters. And it just gives you insight into what a really good guy he is. In the letter he starts out, well, Dad, they're telling us we have to write everybody, we have to write our moms today, and being that I don't have one, I'll write to you. He talked about being in the trenches for the first time. I don't know where they were, somewhere in France, I guess. He used to say, camp can't tell you, he used to say, when it asked for write down the location of your letter, camp can't tell you, you know. He said, the first night, I guess you want to know how your son did in the trenches, but I think you already do. He said, the first night I was really frightened. I thought every tree was a Jerry, you know, but I did okay. And then we were attacked with the mustard gas a couple of days later. And when they trained us we had to do it in 4 seconds. Well, wouldn't you know it, we did it in 2. Let's see, the war ended in 1919. Somewhere around 1923, he met my mother. I found out through Kathleen, her and my father would meet in a park in Lower Manhattan for lunch every day. They brown bagged it, and they would talk. And then go back to work. She would stay with him on the train going to work. She said that They were talking one day, and he said I said, where did he meet my mother? And he said, in a speakeasy. I never told that to anybody.
I love it.
I didn't want to do that to my mom. They got married, and Kathleen told me that he said to my mother, I want to have a lot of children. You won't have to worry about anything, but I just want a lot of kids. Because he had a very lonely childhood. They never talked, these women. They were very cold, emotionless, no signs of affection whatsoever. Even as a little kid, there was always like noise and people around, and he'd just be sitting there reading his paper or sleeping. They started dating, and I had my sister Pat. Patricia Ann, I think it is. Patricia Ann, yeah. They had Pat. She was born 1923, December 7th, 1923. Feast of the Immaculate Conception. And that was my mother. She never had sex in her whole life. And then Kay was born in 25. Buddy John, my father's son John, we called him Buddy. He was born 28. Bobby was born 1930. The twins were born 1931. Jimmy was born 1933, I think. Mary was born in 34. I was born in 43. And growing up was just, it was a great time. It was just, when I look back on it now, we had my mom and dad. We had Aunt Ella. We had my mom and dad's kids, so we're already up to what, 13 people? No. Mom and dad's 2, 9 is 11, Aunt Ella's 12, Bill Kirk is 13, and when Will came home from the war, there was 14 people. Living in the 3-story house. Again, Pat had it on the concourse by the concourse. I look at my mom. When I was 3 years old, she was dealing with like 6 or 7 teenagers. It was just insane. There was always a huge dinner every single night. Like there was just food all over the table. She was always working and cooking and cleaning. If visitors were coming, she'd break out the whole house. Everybody had to start painting the day before, the woodwork and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So your parents generally got along. They had a good marriage.
Yeah, they really did.
No,
they were the team. All right, and God forbid, like I was with you guys. If you went to me and I said something, then you went to Mom to get a different answer. It's the worst crime you could commit.
Right.
Yeah, worst thing you could do.
Right.
They were fanatical about that.
Now, do you remember any things with your dad? Like, did you go fishing with him?
No, nothing.
So you didn't really hang with him?
Absolutely
to
nothing.
Throw the ball, catch
Absolutely
things.
nothing.
All right.
Nothing. Zero zippo.
Okay.
All right. But I remember he would take me to ball games once in a while, to Yankee Stadium, and you had to wear a shirt and tie. If you look at the old black and whites, everybody's wearing a shirt and tie. Yeah. Then he would take me to his bar where he hung out as a young fella, called O'Reilly's, on 161st Street, right across from the train yards. And I'd go in there, and all I would see was Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth, and sitting in the booths and at the bar in this place. Pictures of, photographs of him. That's where he did a lot of hanging out. Even as a kid, I guess I was born with a sense of history. That's the only thing I can tell you. It's because it meant things to me. Now, if he's taking me at this time, I'm 6. I'm 5 or 6.
Right.
This is my old sergeant from World War I, Joe McCourt. When they prop me up on a stool, give me all the coke I wanted, all the hard-boiled eggs,
Wow.
all these guys.
Right.
His war buddies. At that time, my dad was, he'd be in his late 40s, early 50s.
Okay.
Early 50s.
Okay.
My mom and dad had friends. This is extraordinary. There's a funeral home on Jerome Avenue in the Bronx called Walter B. Cook. And it has 5 viewing rooms. His wake lasted 5 days. And every night for 5 days, they had to use the 5 rooms. They kept saying, who is this guy? It was a newspaper article, and then, not a newspaper article, I'm sorry, a personal letter from the governor of New York, Averell Harriman, right, thanking my father for his service and his job well done after World War II. My father was a warehouse manager. This is a good family story. Buddy bought him a suit, and Pat paid his car fare. And he went down to Washington, D.C., and he got the job. He was in charge of all the surplus material coming back from overseas. He had an office in the Empire State Building,
Wow.
about 600 or 700 people working for him. There's also a place before the Depression, 1929, I think it was. It's on 64th Street between Central Park West and Fifth Avenue, Broadway, whatever it is. I don't know what street it is. There used to be a restaurant called the Ginger Man, and across the street was the Monk's Inn, and the Monk's Cellar, and that type of thing. That's an old warehouse there. If you look up on top, it should be still there, is a miniature, like a 20-foot high Statue of Liberty. And that was the home of Liberty Moving and Storage. And my dad had that company before the Depression. Right? My mom lived in Cliffside Park. He took a ferry to work every day. My mom drove a big giant Packard. The kids all over Jersey. She left the shift on the floor and all that stuff and everything. He was a success. He really did very well. His very sad story. Very sad story. I told you where my grandmother Ellen Kelly was put into Manhattan State Hospital in 1904. Now, when you think about it, her brother sent her over here to be with her husband and one of her children, her son, and to get some support, and to get some life. Aunt Kate knew a lot of the police officers, the Irish guys, And I guess she was embarrassing Aunt Kate and Aunt Ella because people would come, or whatever it was, and like she'd be drunk all the time, causing scenes and all that stuff. She was very pretty too. I have a picture of her somewhere. I'll show it to you. I guess it was 1928. My grandfather committed suicide, and that was the same period of time that the Manhattan State Hospital notified the family that my grandmother was dying, and she was very sick. My father's mother is in Manhattan State Hospital. My father's mother-in-law, my mother's mother, said to her son-in-law, my father, "Go see your mother." And he never knew it. He was told she was dead. And he wouldn't go. Then I think I don't know if it was a confrontation, because I don't see my father being confrontational with his father. I don't see that happening. But a conversation about what's going on and what happened and why wasn't I told, blah, blah, blah. And I think my grandfather just got really sad about the whole thing, about the decisions he made, everything, and he just killed himself.
Do you think that he was, even though they had the drinking problem, do you think he was still in love with her?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. I have no idea.
Okay, we don't know. It was just probably more he was sad about the circumstance that what happened.
That's what I think.
Right.
And when I remember being a little kid on Decatur Avenue in the Bronx in the 1940s, looking at the photograph, and I said, "Who's this?" She goes, "That's your grandfather." I said, "Well, how did he die?" I said, "What happened to him?" She said, "He died." Now, well, how did he die? He fell off a telephone pole. He didn't even work for the phone company. But that's, she didn't want to tell me he killed himself.
How did he
My mother, they were very big on the secrets. When I was with Kathleen in Pasadena, I asked her, "Could you please tell me the true story of my grandfather? You were there." She said, "I'm not going to tell you. You have no need to know that." I said, "It's my family history." And she wouldn't tell me. She went to the grave not telling me. Tim told me what he could. Tim wouldn't say that he jumped off and killed himself. Tim said he was in a fight and somebody pushed him.
They don't have the heart to tell you
they
that
can't.
he did it, Dad.
Yeah. It says on his death certificate, suicidal jump. Let me tell you about a great story about my mom. All right. I'm 12, 13, tops. Coming across 238th Street in the Bronx from Cross County Shopping Center, going up the hill toward White Plains Road, 238th Street. All right? Okay? Jumps up at the bus driver. Stop the bus, screaming. And there's a drunk guy laying in the gutter, off the curb in the gutter, on the cobblestone. Right? She goes, "Come and help me." To me. You don't even hesitate. You just do what she tells you to do. Pick him up. He had soiled his pants. The smell was just terrible. He was drunk, incoherent. Gets him on the bus. We get all the way up to White Plains, where we usually get off and walk, but the bus goes 2 blocks past. So we waited there. She didn't give a shit. She didn't care about the neighbors. We're dragging this guy up the street, 4 blocks. Get him in the house. She goes, "You go inside." Just told me to leave. got all his clothes off and put him in a tub, washed him and cleaned him, got him in bed, wrapped up in a clean bedding and all that stuff. Took all the soiled clothes and washed them all by hand, got everything washed out, all right? Joe McCourt was his sergeant in World War I. She saw him.
Recognized him.
Yeah.
That's
where she was.
that's a good-
Then my dad drank 2 quarts of Ballantine ale and a 12-ounce bottle of Guinness Stout every night that I knew him. My 14 years here. He came home, he changed his clothes, he had a light pair of, like a light blue, a pair of like really fine pants, you know. And that's what he wore around the house. He smoked 8 Camels a day. He would open up a newspaper. You talk about, everybody called me Anal Andy. He'd open up the newspaper and he'd roll the cigarette so it got loose. Then he had a little scissor where he'd trim the ends off. And I said, why do you do that? Because you draw on it easier. Oh, let me tell you a good story. I'll never forget this woman's name. I hope she really, I don't say it. Her name was Mrs. Billicka. Billicka. She was my 5th grade teacher. School bored me. So I had to bring a little book to school every day about my behavior and my conduct. And every day I was getting punished. Not physically, but, you know, go to bed now, that kind of stuff. No dessert, no dinner, whatever it was. So one day she wrote in pencil that I moved after the whistle blew in the yard, you know. I hated it. My mother hated it too. This is a good story. So I get the book home. I said, Dad, I can't take it anymore. So I erased what she wrote. Left her signature and just signed okay. So the next day I give it to her. She doesn't say a word to me. She just writes, the next day she writes in the book, your son has committed an act of skullduggery. I had no idea what that meant. So when I got home and showed my mother, she said, get the dictionary, hurry up. So she gets the dictionary and she reads it and she goes, he's going to kill him.
Really?
It was so funny. It was so, 5th grade.
Did he?
Yeah.
He did. He got
Go
home.
get your pajamas on.
So
Takes
she-
his belt off. You know, and he's hit me with the belt, but he's not. My father never punished you emotionally. It was always done because that's all he knew. He didn't know anything different. He passed away when I was 14. It was a terrible time. All I remember, my mom started wringing her hands, something's wrong, because he wasn't there and she hadn't heard from him. She said, we have to get down to Fordham Hospital right away. We gotta get to Fordham Hospital right away. And I remember walking in and she was running in front of me, running to where the doctors were, asking about John Kelly. And the doctor turned around and said, he's dead. And she just, and it seemed like instantaneously, everybody was there. Arthur was thrown up all over the place, my brother, like he was just. I remember my mom telling me the first night, I used to sleep in a hallway. It's a very wide hallway. We had like a day bed in there. And I'd sleep there, and she said I just woke up screaming in the middle of the night, just screaming at the top of my lungs. That's all I remember.
That night, that first night.
Yeah. I didn't have much, I don't want to say anything, you know, he was my dad. There were moments he was incredibly cool, like just really cool. There was a father-son event at All Hallows High School when I was attending, probably sophomore year of high school. It's down near Yankee Stadium. And I know my dad didn't want to go and I didn't want to go, but my mother made us go. We were standing in the back, me and him against the wall. You know, there's other father and son there, you know, it was crowded. I said to him, do you really want to stay here for this dinner? And he goes, not really. He goes, I said, you want to go home? I said, okay, let's go. And we snuck out, both of us, and got on the bus, came up the concourse. And I asked him, I said, would you mind if I continued on up to Yonkers to St. Barnabas? There's a Friday night dance up there. And he said, no, sure. And then I didn't even have to ask, he gave me $1. You know? He was tired. He already raised 8 kids. I understand. I really understand. I don't have any ill feelings about that at all. I really don't. No. He's a very good man.
Yeah.
He never had a vacation in his life. The most money he ever made was $3,200 a year. You know, just a good guy. And we all ate. We all were clothed. In freshman year of high school, I ran track in All Hallows. All Hallows is over on 162nd Street, right off the Grand Concourse. Opposite end of the park from the courthouse, just around the corner from Yankee Stadium. I had to get on a train at Yankee Stadium, 161st, go down to 149th, walk up to another station, and get on a train going up to 169th, and then walk over all the way by Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, which right across the street is the 69th Armory. And that's where my father left. That's where he was in the National Guard.
Wow.
And I ran track there in high school. This is a good story. I didn't want to run track anymore because I didn't get home till 7 or 8 o'clock at night in the winter. It was just terrible. And then they gave us 3 hours of homework every night. And I wanted to ask him if I could leave the track team. The difference between my mother and father. I was terrified to ask him. All right? So my sister Mary, she was the baby. So she set my dad all up for it. She got my mother to go out shopping. And I'm sitting there in the chair next to my dad watching TV, terrified to say anything. It took me and he wasn't going to help me. It took me 3 hours to get up the courage to ask him. All right? And he said, why? And I explained to him, just like you. He said, well, okay, but you better get better marks. All right? Then the next morning when I was in bed, the door flew open like the devil was coming with fire coming out of the nose, screaming at me, how could you do this to me? I'm leaving the track team. That's all I'm doing. Screaming, how could you do this to me? Oh my God. And I'm like, oh, I was terrified. And for the first time, I never heard the tone of voice before in my life. I just heard coming from the living room. Ethel, that's enough. Just like that.
And what did she do?
Stop. Tell you when it was. It was April of 1959. There's a luncheonette at the last stop on a D train at 24th and Bainbridge Avenue. I think it was 26th and Bainbridge. But I was looking for somebody, a girl I had known, Kathy Marsden. I had seen her, mom's friend. And I saw Kathy sitting in the back room with this girl that I never knew, and I had never seen before. And I walked up and sat down. Kathy introduced me to her. And I looked at Mom and I said, oh my God, you had the most incredible I've ever seen in my life. And she did. And from that moment on, I didn't even see Kathy. It was just all over. I was only 15, I think, 16, something like that. And it was all over. My first date, I wore a shirt and suit and tie, your tie and jacket and all. That's what everybody did in those days. We went to the movie theater. I forget what we saw. I had asked her, I said, hey, did you see that movie Samson or something? She goes, no, I haven't seen it. I said, neither have I. And I walked away. I didn't know. I really didn't know. I didn't know it. I had no idea what to say. We went to the movies. I'm walking her home up Perry Avenue. I'm 16, she's 15.
Okay.
All right. And she said, if you think we're getting married and you're going to name your sons George, you're crazy. Yeah, I know the woman about a total of 20 minutes of my whole life. I used to make fun of her because I'd be walking along with her talking, and the next thing I know, there's nobody beside me. She was always tripping and falling down. She'd trip over a dime, I used to tell her. We got married in 1964, so I was 21 and she was 20. She had Andrew when she was 21.
Okay.
And I just turned 22.
Okay.
And by the time we were 27, I think we had 4 kids. And it was just fun. She was always laughing. She was always kidding around. She was a lot of fun. Drove me absolutely insane. But I remember, Mom, I found a letter and I destroyed it. I'll tell you about it. I decided to tell you about it. And we were teenagers. We weren't married. We weren't engaged or anything. And I was a typical 16 or 17-year-old jackass. She wrote a letter to her girlfriend, which she never mailed. She just wrote it out because I had chosen to go see somebody else at that time. And she was telling us girl how she was throwing up and how sick she was. And I almost cried when I read it.
I think it was just love at first sight for
It was.
you two.
It really was. It really was.
I think there are just certain souls that when they meet,
Yeah.
it's different
It is different.
than others,
It really is, Jen.
Right.
She's incredible.
It isn't your sweet conversation that bring this sensation. Oh no, just the nearness of you. And when you're in my arms, and I hold you so close to me,